This is Fam Electric Ghost. I'm alive on the air with Alan Cox for the first time. He's an entrepreneur, innovator, and mental health change maker. And I want to thank you for being on the podcast.
Yeah, thank you very much for having me. Going to be a enjoyable and interesting talk, I'm sure.
I want to let people know we are a featured podcast on the Newsly platform. You'll see there's a coupon code scrolling on the below. And if you use coupon code GHOST, you can get 1 month free premium subscription. Again, we are a featured podcast. Fam Electric Ghost podcast is on the Newsly platform. And for this episode, we're actually at episode 910 for the Fam Electric Ghost Show. And this episode, we were going to talk about as the topic, escaping the depths of depression with our guest. And we've got your website here at www.everyyellow.com. And for those of you on the audio version of the podcast, that's www.everyyellow.com. So I'm not sure where you want to start. Maybe you can talk about what the website represents, and then we can get into the overall topics of a mental health change maker.
Okay, the website is basically the website for our mental fitness app called Everyellow. It's something that is kind of a passion project for me. I found that when I was struggling with my mental health, none of the apps out there really worked for me, and I discovered kind of why they don't work. And yeah, we've when I say we, it's basically me and my band of kind of helpers out there. We've put this app together that is really effective and it's enjoyable to use. And yeah, we're what we call an impact venture. So our mission is to create impact, not about making lots of profits. So part of that mission is that there's an always free version of the app, not just a kind of bullshit 7 days and then you're gone. There's always something there for you. But we also need to feed ourselves and continue the development. So if anyone can afford to pay, then we encourage that they do so.
So you have a pay model and then you have a free model. And that's really cool because a lot of times, like in the US, it's very expensive, and a lot of apps, like you said, they have like a pay mode. And it's hard for people to get the care. People have a hard time actually coming to the decision that they need help. And then when they go to find help, then it's like, whoa, I can't afford the help.
Exactly right. Yeah.
So it's always like the catch-22 is like, well, it takes a lot to actually discover that you actually need to address something. And then it's like, okay, well, now what am I going to do?
Yeah, absolutely.
So what was the turning point in your life that made you like shift your mindset and actually develop this Everyellow app?
It wasn't really any one thing. I mean, I'd already suffered kind of decades of poor mental health, which then led to depression and even multiple suicide attempts. And thank God I wasn't successful. But I then there was kind of a catalyst in my life about 10 years ago where I fairly rapidly went from a position of basically being hopeless, just not wanting to go on, to suddenly seeing that there was a path forward.
Mm-hmm.
I then went on a probably 5-6 years of personal growth and transformation, and while all of that is happening, mental health in the media is kind of getting more and more prevalent. I love Avicii, and Avicii took his life, and I love Anthony Bourdain and always watch his stuff, and he took his life.
Yeah.
So I think the catalyst was, a close friend of mine then took his life. But I think there was just a realization that too much of the focus at that time around the term mental health was really about mental illness, and that, you know, whenever you talk about mental health, everyone thinks that's not me, but the reality is everyone has mental health wherever they are on the scale. And I'd had this kind of realization over many years that by actually actively working on your, I like to call it your mental fitness, and I can talk more about the difference between mental fitness and mental health later. But by working on your mental fitness, you not only build up your resilience and stop yourself from becoming mentally unwell, but it also opens up all kinds of other things in your life that until you experience them, it's really hard to explain. I kind of use the analogy, it's kind of like trying to explain the experience of lovemaking to someone that's never experienced it, right? You can't, you know, it's hard for me to explain, but basically a shift happens in your, like a permanent shift happens in your brain where you just start seeing things differently, and you kind of, you know, for once in your life, you step off that kind of passive mouse wheel of life, which most people are on, and you know, wherever you are in your mental health, you know, position, you step off and you can kind of suddenly see, you know, like you get illuminated to a new thing that basically takes you on a new path. So yeah, it was kind of not one thing, but, you know, a whole series of things that led me to thinking, like, I want to create an app that actually works for people.
That's interesting because I mean I'm a creator, and I started this podcast talking to creators, and I found that a lot of creators, you know, creative people, they take the problems they have and they use their art as like therapy. Like a lot of, if you talk to a lot of singer songwriters or creative people or artists, authors, they'll say it's like cathartic. Like the process of creativity for artists, it kind of keeps us balanced until we find some other thing that gives us some issue. But because we can kind of have that conversation with ourselves, is like, where is my head at? Like, you take the inputs, you take the outputs, and then use it to try to. You could be feeling melancholy, you could be feeling good, and you take this piece of art, and they try to. It kind of becomes this examination of the in and out, like the other you and the you and everybody else and the environment around you. And it's always been something that I've used to try to keep me in balance with other things, because it's kind of mind, heart, body, soul, right? There's always these legs to who you are. And if you don't pay attention to one of them, then the other one's going to cause problems. So it's still kind of holistic. It's not going to solve everything. But what I think is like the idea that you have these turning points. Me in my life, I was a cancer survivor. At age 27, I had a level 3 sarcoma. And that was kind of like a big moment for me to actually challenge some of the things in my life, what I was doing and what I wasn't doing.
Yeah.
And I found it as a way to, you know, I wasn't somebody that could communicate. I would have never had a podcast. I would have never been a musician out in front. So I kind of had this catalyst, this, you know, this big, you know, crucible moment that I decided, okay, I'm going to do this because I survived. And I think it's like, I think people, when they think about mental health or your mental state, is like everybody has different degrees, like great shades of where they are. But I think the problem is healthcare doesn't look at it like your mental health is just like your body health. It's all part of the holistic thing. And a lot of people, they're well, separate. How's that separate? Like you're all part of the same thing.
Yeah. And just to kind of like make that more tangible for everybody, if you imagine your mental health or mental fitness, whatever label you want to give it, if you basically think of a spectrum between 1 and 10, where 1 is you're at danger of self-harm and 10 you're more enlightened than the Dalai Lama probably, around the 3 mark is where, if you was to say be assessed by a doctor, around the 3 mark is where you transition from being mentally well to mentally unwell, right?
Mhm.
So if you was say assessed and the doctor thinks, well, you're about a 3.5 or a 4, if they're a good doctor, they won't medicate you, right? But you can be a 4, but there's just so much more in front of you, and I think this is the danger is that people, especially in that middle area, like I depending on what research data you look at, around 80% of our population are between like 4 and 6,
Wow.
and it's not great. It's like a huge bell curve, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
And I think most people that are in that zone, they're just not aware of where they're at, and they think this is just the way life is.
I think that's life. Like, that's the
Yep.
way life is. They might have other things going on where they've gone into like codependencies, they've gone into certain behaviors. And, we can see it in our society today where it's kind of like COVID has, exposed a bunch of things. And
Mm,
it seems like the whole issue of mental health, at least in the US, has been exacerbated because people didn't really pay attention to it. And
mm,
then this big crisis happens and everybody probably needs therapy, right?
yeah.
Because everybody got this worldwide thing they got thrown on them. And then
Mm,
people are still trying to struggle like, well, I don't need that because of
mm,
their own mindset or what their grandparents told them. Well, other people thought they're going to stick it out. They're going to be, have this kind of workman like thing. Well, I can just work through it.
mm,
I can just like stick it out. And
yeah.
it's like, oh, I can't do that because that's somebody else.
Mm,
It's like there's this whole thing where people don't want to deal with it because what they were taught, their spirituality kind of goes against it. They don't believe in it. So then there's all kinds of barriers to
mm,
actually getting out of it
mm.
because you
But
can't address it if you don't
yeah,
believe
yeah,
it.
yeah. It's kind of it's a really sad truth, I guess, is that when it comes to any other kind of part of the body or the human condition, if you like, there's no problem in understanding things for the way they are. So, like for example, if you or a friend or someone has, say, diabetes, you understand that there's a part of their body that isn't working properly, and it doesn't produce enough insulin, and therefore they have diabetes, and like no one has an issue with that, right? And the person that has diabetes will basically think, okay, I have this thing that's not quite right. I need to do this thing. And for some diabetics, they can adjust their lifestyle. For some other diabetics, they will take medication, right? And that's really the same for heart trouble,
Yeah.
kidneys, whatever. But when it comes to what's in your brain, I think there's a general perception that if there's something going on in your head, it's not like all of that other stuff. It's basically, it's kind of, I
It's
don't know
not
if
tangible.
imaginary.
Yeah, it's
Yeah,
not tangible. It's like
it's
if
not.
it's not, yeah, because like you can measure A1C. I'm a diabetic. Like I
Yeah,
can look, I have a glucose monitor. I can see
yeah,
what my number is. I can
yeah,
see if I'm doing right or I'm not. My
yeah.
doctor can go give me my A1C. But then like I think they're starting to get things where they can do MRIs and but they don't fully understand things, right? So it's not as well understood as cancer or diabetes or leukemia, all the diseases that you can actually get numbers and everybody says, okay, that's what it is,
That's
right?
right. And I think, but the thing that is very, very clear though is that over the last 20-25 years, we understand a lot more about what is going on in the brain. Like so for example, if you and I'll use a really real example from my life, right? Is that I I nearly got killed in the Canterbury earthquakes, and that kind of led me to have quite a big breakdown. But for quite a few years after that, whenever there was quite a big noise, or say a truck was going past and the ground rumbles, right? I would get quite bad anxiety attack. It'd come on very quickly, and they just continued because I didn't understand the mechanics of what is going on. I just thought, a part of my brain is fucked up, right? And that's
Is that
just
like
that's just
post-traumatic stress? Was that like a post-traumatic stress type of thing response?
well, yeah. What I then learnt, right, is that there's a reptilian part of your brain, and part of that is the amygdala, and the amygdala is there to basically it's very, very it's not intelligent at all. It
Mm.
basically picks up on a signal, and it says you're in danger,
Oh, it's
right?
a fight or flight.
Yeah. So basically, there's two pathways, right? There's one that basically says do the fight or flight thing, and there's another pathway which actually takes longer for the signal to get there, which is your like more cognitive reasoning side of things, which can actually evaluate the situation. The trouble
Mhm.
is the signal takes longer to get there, right?
Too long, so you might
Yeah,
run or fight before it gets there.
exactly right. So anyway, I can go on with this story, but I think the point is when I basically understood the mechanics of it, number one, I was able to basically think, oh, hold on, this is actually a real thing. It's a real, like I'm kind of in engineering, right? And I
Yeah,
can
yeah. You found a
there's a mechanical sequence going on here. So one I thought this is actually normal. It's not that I'm broken. This is normal. I've
then you
gone
can work
through.
with it. Yeah, then you
Yeah,
found a way that like if you can understand it, then you can name it. You can start to like figure out like are there options, you know?
yeah. And what I did just in that example is like, I distinctly remember the first time where I was in a social situation where I was talking to somebody, um, and I have no idea what triggered off the anxiety attack. It could have been a smell. It could have been
Mm,
someone in the room looked the same or similar to as a bully at school. It
mm,
could have been all number of things, and my amygdala would have sent off this thing. And I remember, my when I have one of these anxiety attacks, I kind of feel like all my legs are going to jelly, and I feel shaky in my hands. And while I was having this conversation with this guy, I was actually in another part of my brain. I was able to say to myself, hold on, don't worry. This is just a natural thing. Your amygdala has probably been triggered by something
get
that
triggered, yeah.
you're actually completely safe. You're not in danger. And this is all going in one side of the brain while I'm having this conversation, right?
Yeah, yeah.
And it subsided. It
But
just
then you
subsided.
because you started to get like a rational approach to something that didn't understand. So like I think
Yeah.
the fear of like irrationality or well, why is this happening? And if you don't have a good understanding of why, 'cause I had a roommate in college who used to get panic attacks. And I was 17, 16. I didn't understand what it was. I was like, what is
Mm,
this? And
mm,
then over time, because he's my roommate, I started to realize that he had these triggers. And I
mm,
was going into psychology and sociology courses. So I was trying to be more understanding. And there
mm,
was like a couple, a bunch of jocks around there and they'd make fun of him. And I was like,
mm,
no, don't make fun of it. It's something real. We're in college. Like,
mm,
don't you want to use your head? like,
mm.
so I would like try to defend him and say, hey, there must be a reason why this happened. Like, we're here to learn, right? We're in the
Yeah.
Socratic method. Like,
Yeah.
don't be a jerk. Um,
Mm,
but yeah, and then over time he described to me, and he was going through therapy and figuring out what was going on. So I think he'd started to discover the kind of things that you
Mm.
are talking about.
Mm.
And I just, I got to witness it because he was my roommate. And
Mm.
I'm like, wow. So it's real.
Yeah.
I mean, these things are real. And when you actually, experience it, and a lot of people is like, well, can't you be empathetic? You
Mm.
know, even if you don't experience it or you don't
Yeah.
know somebody, the problem is because it's not real. It's like, if you can't see it, like, you can't see a virus. So some people will say, well, it's not real because they
Mm.
can't see it. They can't physically see it. Science can see it, but then they, I don't believe science because I don't trust them.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
you like, okay, so where are you
Yeah.
gonna be?
The funny thing is though, like I hear that a lot, in terms of like, with the mind you can't see it. And my response to that is like, other than say breaking a leg and a bone is sticking out of your shin bone or something, right?
Yeah.
What other diseases can you see?
You can't see cancer unless you want to go look at my labs. You
Do you
can't
know
really.
what I mean? Like, you
Yeah,
from the outside, people have got all kinds of problems, and you can't see them, But I think there seems to be this, yeah. If I could have the wisdom, um, when I was a younger person, whenever I was feeling down, lost, or whatever, um, I I think if I could talk to myself again now, it would be go and explore what's going on. You don't necessarily need to go to therapy. Just like, like take a panic attack or anxiety. Go Google
Google it. Yeah.
what causes this. What and you
Well,
and
we
you
have
and
the world's encyclopedias at our fingertips on our smartphone.
yeah.
And so it sounds like this idea is like, you could look at your mind like an iOS, like the Windows, like, Apple
Mm.
operating system. And you had this concept like faulty mental operating system. And,
Mm.
I'm a IT guy. My day job is I'm a system designer.
Yeah.
And I design systems. And
Cool.
systems have all kinds of error codes and faults and stuff. Things can go wrong.
Mm.
And we have to deal with like the unhappy path, like
Yeah.
the thing we didn't expect. And then we
Yeah.
have to fix it because
Yeah.
we didn't anticipate that was going to happen. So we didn't have no way of handling it. So I
Yeah.
think it's kind of like, it seems like to me, if you equate that, like there are things that happen that you don't have, like the response is like uncomfortable or it doesn't feel right. You're not responding to it in a natural way, in an easy way. It's hard. Something's happening and it does like a square hole in the wrong round peg. You're like, what's going on? And then you got to
Yeah.
figure out like why is that happening? I'm hitting the fault. I'm hitting that
Yeah.
error code. Like
Yeah.
why?
Yeah. And like the analogy with an operating system is just fantastic. I use that all of the time. And the there's if you think of any kind of piece of computer software, there's two key elements to that piece of software, right? There's the actual program, and there's also the data, right? Um, so both of those things can be quite, the data can be corrupt, and I'll
Yeah,
explain.
corrupt data. Yeah,
I'll explain that in a second. And also the operating system can, the software can be programmed the wrong way. So
you're broken or have an error. You
yeah,
abend.
yeah,
Like I'm an old school COBOL guy. He's like, yeah, it abended because
yeah,
we didn't know what to do. It's like it's vSAN DB2 is giving me an abend. It's like why?
yeah,
Because it's something it didn't expect, and you blew it up because like it doesn't know what to do with that.
exactly right. And so like just like an example of say, um, like corrupt data, right? Is over your years of being alive, you would have had all kinds of experiences that would have stored away in your hippocampus, right? Sorry, your hippocampus basically controls where it's going to store things away. But basically, you would have stored away all kinds of information and stories, much of which is completely untrue, right?
You
So
believe it.
you would, yeah, like, you might have had, say, an experience where you fell off a bike or something, and you think all bikes are dangerous, or you might, you might have been told as a very young person that you'll never be good at anything. You'll never, like, for me, I love you talking about creativity, right? When I was at school, all I wanted to do was things like art, music, history, all of that kind of stuff. You know, I used to draw and play my childhood was
Like
in my
Lego,
bedroom,
Rector
yeah,
sets, Legos, stuff like that.
all that stuff. And when it come to taking my options at school, I kind of got the proverbial slap around the head by my parents and said, "Oh no, you
No art.
that you'll never make a career in that stuff." So they pushed me into all this stuff that my brain wasn't wired for. But here's the thing: is I'm now, in my 50s, and I've never really done anything creative, but I have an inner yearning. Like, I know that if I had I really think that I should have been in music. I really think I should have been doing something like that,
Yeah, you want the guitar, you want the piano, you want the bass, you want something, violin. And if you'd had it, then you could have got trained on it. You could have got to a
Yeah,
certain place.
yeah,
But people don't value those things.
yeah.
Yeah, half of my life is music. You can see
Mm,
it like behind me, all
that's right. Yeah,
my
yeah,
synthesizers. And I
yeah.
just had to force it. But I
Mm,
did go that technical route. So my day job
yeah,
is a technical job, but I kept playing.
yeah,
Since I was 17, I kept on playing because it's something I wanted. So I kind of
yeah,
forced it, and I
yeah.
didn't become super professional, but I'm kind of
Mm,
semi-professional. But it
that's
was
right.
because I wanted it. And
Yeah,
people told me there's no value in that.
yeah.
And I've argued that the creativity I do with my art actually influences my design
Mm,
stuff I do. And
yeah, of
people are
course.
starting to realize that today, that,
Mm,
oh, these creatives, we need these people, but they
mm,
don't fit in the cube. Cool, because they tend to not want to do the same thing all the time. They want to do different things, and then how do you measure that?
mm,
So then it's like, well, sometimes you shouldn't be measuring. Like Einstein, he got a D. Does that mean he didn't know what he was doing? He was
mm,
bored with it. He was beyond it.
mm.
Right? So then sometimes you're trying to put people in a bell curve, and
Yeah.
it's not going to work out because the creative
Mm,
people are going to be like, I don't want to be in there. They'll go create their
mm,
own business.
mm.
They'll go do their own thing because like
Yeah.
you can't. And then you want them, but then you want to force them into the box.
Mm.
How are you going to deal
Exactly
with that?
right.
Yeah, so
Mm.
it's always hard because the society tends to want to throw you in a box,
Yeah.
and then it's like you get pressure not to do it. So then people aren't becoming who they want to be, and then later they find out that there's all this pressure because they didn't get to do what they wanted.
Yeah. And all that time, it's taken its toll.
Yeah, I mean, then
Yeah.
you need to talk about it, and then people don't want to talk about it. you know, you know, because they tell you shouldn't talk about it because it's like just be like work or be in the cubicle because that's all right. That's everything you need. Rick. Just do
Yeah.
that.
Like Dilbert. Yeah.
Just do that. That's all you need. You don't need anything else.
That's right.
But yeah, it seems like to try to you got to reprogram your mind, and a lot of people. Uh, yeah, I think we had a little bit of a glitch, but I think we're back, right?
Cool.
You're back.
Yeah. Back.
Yeah. So there was a little glitch in the network. You never know because we're on the internet. But yeah. So it's like reprogramming your mind. It's like that operating thing again, because I
Mm.
think a lot of people, for whatever reason, they got it from their parents or their grandparents or their church or their organization or the company. They got them stuck in that Dilbert thing, and they got them stuck in the paradigm because the grandpa said this, and the father said that, and the mom said that, and grandma said this. So now you're stuck, and then you realize, oh, is that a truth or is that a belief?
Yeah.
That's what I found a lot of times. People were like, oh, that's the truth. It's like, well, no, that's really a belief. The truth isn't that. Go
Mm.
actually look for what it really is logically. Are you actually following a truth or are you following a belief?
Exactly right. Exactly right. And that's that belief is that corrupt data, right? It's and if you add on to that, so a faulty software programming that's not only taking in corrupt data, but it's also, the algorithm says 2 and 2 equals 5, right?
Yeah.
You could compound those things together, and that, that's why we, don't understand our emotions. It's why we kind of react and behave the way we do, all of those kinds of things.
So a lot of times, I think a lot of people cover the problems with other things that kind of exacerbate it, right? So you cover it, or you get deeper into displeasure or being unhappy because, like, are you living for what you want to do, or are you living for what other people expect you to do? And so a lot of times people aren't really living the life they want. And the interesting thing I found is that when I talk to a lot of people, I come on my podcast, they're creators, they're business people, they're people that come up, they actually figured out, oh, by the time they come to talk to me, they figured out what they want to do.
Mm.
And then I'm talking to this person that's like, I finally realized why I'm here, what I want to do, where I want to go. And it's always really interesting because then it's like, wow, it's cool to talk to people that have figured it out or in the process of figuring it out, but they're going
Yeah.
on that road. And I find that like it's helpful to me to get
Mm.
different perspectives, and I
Yeah.
like the idea of it's like therapy for me every time I talk to somebody, because then I get
Mm.
all these points of view, and there are
Exactly right.
people all over the world, and then I'm like, wow, I should be less judgmental. I should listen, you know,
Mm.
because then you learn.
That's right. That's right. Yeah. I was reading a book recently that kind of, and there's kind of two parts to this really. I read a book a long time ago called, I think it's called Fish Philosophy. Have you heard about that book?
I think I might have heard of it. I probably didn't read it yet. I think I've heard the
Yeah,
buzz.
and it's basically it's about this fish market, this fish stall in, I think it's Seattle or somewhere,
Oh, that's a big one.
and basically these people, there's all these different like fish stalls, but the one that everyone goes to is the one where all of the people that are on the fish stall are having fun. It's not particularly glamorous
Oh, the one where they
handling
like
fish all day.
where they're throwing the fish or something.
That's right.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I know that one.
So I'd read about that years ago, and the whole thing about fish philosophy is, you know, it may not be the work that's making you dissatisfied. It's how you're bringing yourself to work,
Yeah.
right? And recently, I'm still reading a book by this lady called Ruby Tui. She's a Kiwi, a female Kiwi rugby player, and she was talking about her like Samoan half of the family, and what she said was, is in that Samoan culture, people were, even if they didn't have particularly good jobs, they would just do their job, with a smile on their face, because the purpose they found in that work was, the reason that they were there was to basically nurture their family. So it was an indirect thing, but like all while they're doing this kind of work that others might find
Yeah.
tedious or mundane, all the time they're thinking, this is helping this,
Yeah. It's like
and
my my grandfather was a coal miner, and
mm,
he said, all work is respectable,
mm,
right? It doesn't matter what you do, right?
yeah,
Because it's like if you're working, you're an honest person, you're doing the job, you should be respected. As a coal miner, people want to say this and this because I'm a coal miner, but people are going to respect me because I respect myself.
yeah,
Like, I know I do very dangerous work. I know it's
yeah,
necessary. I know it's real hard. It's dangerous, but
mm,
I have pride in it. And he learned a lot from me. He learned how to be an
mm,
electrician, learned how to be a plumber, built his own house. He took all the skills having to be a miner where you have to be self-reliant. You have to figure out how to do stuff. You have to kind of work things out of in an emergency, figure things out. And it just he became a very self-reliant guy. And he became, learned how to do plumbing, learned how to do electrician, learned how to be a carpenter because he learned how to fix a car. He just, he didn't even have a high school education, and he figured all this stuff out. Had 9 kids. It's like, big family. It's like, and people respected him because he respected himself.
That's
Right.
right. Yeah.
So a lot of people are like, oh, well, I'm doing this, or then they don't respect themselves. They feel bad and they're bad all the time. So I think it's interesting with that Samoan point of view. It's like, yeah, be happy. But what you're doing is actually positive for your family. Your family can survive. You could do something. What's wrong with that? You
That's right.
find joy in something, then people get joyful around you. It's kind of like when you're a musician. If you're vibing, the crowd vibes. If you're all like, I heard this guy, Victor Wooten. He's a very famous bass player, and he was teaching this master class, and he said, "Hey, I'm going to show you there's no wrong notes. I'm going to go through all the scales and do this rhythm, and it's my approach, not the note. It's I can hit any scale and I can make this work because of my intention. Because I'm happy, I'm funky today. This is what I'm going to do." So then you think about your life. You're trying to hit. Oh, I can only hit the bad note. I don't want to do it. I want to be perfect. So you don't have to be perfect. It's like how you respond to the wrong note and how you recover from that. That's a way you can like live your life. Like if you're a musician and you're playing live, is like how you respond. Do you start all over again? Do you say, "Oh, throw down, you got to start," or do you actually learn how to recover from your mistake and actually even make it look like it wasn't a mistake?
Yeah, that's right. That's right. And that's kind of similar in a way to, a lot of people have regrets, right? They may have done something in the past that they deeply regret, right? And the thing is all of the time that they spend kind of ruminating on that regret, it's just doing you more damage, right? Like as long as you learn from what you did, like that's not, I'm not going to do something like that again. And any time that you spend mentally thinking about something that you can't change, it's
not productive.
it just doesn't help, right?
Right, because it's destructive. Because like if you can't take that and actually do something forward thinking, right? Like if you look back and you have a lesson learned, say, "Well, I did X, now I can do Y, or I can do Z, or whatever. I can do beta, theta, whatever." But if you just keep on saying, "Why did they do beta? Why did they do that? Why did they do that?" It's like, well, are you coming up with a plan? Are you coming up with like, "Oh, I could actually do something like go this path or go that path, or say make this choice?" But if you just say keep on lamenting the same choice, what's that going to do? It's like try something different.
Yeah.
Try a different path.
Yeah.
So that if we're musicians, you look at like what worked and what didn't. Most of the things don't work, right? 100 songs you write, one of them kicks people like. Does that mean you stop, or does that those 99 songs they got to the one? Was that the path that got you to that one? So it's like, do you lament all the ones that didn't work, or you say, well, I learned something on each one of those.
That's right.
So you don't go get all depressed and say, oh, the glass is half empty, half full. It's like, it's full because you actually got there.
Yeah. Exactly right. Yeah. Yeah. It's I remember when I was younger, I would spend a lot of time basically thinking about my next step and thinking, well, I wouldn't exactly call it procrastination, but I guess it was. But basically, I was analyzing to the nth degree, like all these different options.
Not pulling.
And I remember getting myself tied up in knots and thinking, well, what one is the best? But also, here's the funny thing: like let's say I was looking at 3 or 4 options, I basically would think, if I took any one of these 4 options, but there's actually an option over there that's better and I don't know about it,
or shouldn't do it. Shouldn't do it. So you know what they all are, and then you don't make the decision.
Yeah, and cracky, I don't do that anymore. I just get up every day,
go with or something.
Take a step forward, and if you end up kind of hitting a brick wall and you have to turn back and regroup and go another way, it's that's far healthier, right?
It's always that hard thing because I talk to musicians and some guys will show me all this stuff and then they're scared of it. And then usually the thing that they're most scared of is like the best thing. Like, so they show me something and it's like, I don't think I should put this out. And it's like every time somebody tells me that, that's the thing that I tell them to put out. So it's like you think they would trust themselves. They've been doing it 20 years, 10 years, 5, but they don't trust themselves. And that's always the big problem. It's like you have to get to a certain point. You got to trust your kind of ability. Like you have to get comfortable and then make the choice or show somebody or raise your hand or do something. And it's all these things that you don't act on that build up. It's like, well, you never know until you try it. It's like very simple, but it's hard. A lot of people don't do it. And there are people who are really good. And you're like, you didn't move on that? Like, why? Like, why didn't you move on that? That's like the best thing I ever heard. And that's the best thing I've ever seen. It's like, well, I'm scared of what people are going to think. Like, who cares? It's like, to me, after the cancer, it's like, I didn't care. So I started pushing things that I would have never said. And then I got hit back. And then it's like, fine. Like, the people don't like it because there's all these, as soon as you do something, there's going to be a response. And I think people are scared of the response.
Yeah.
Because they don't know what it's going to be. And a lot of times it could be negative. Like if you try to do something different, well, that's not what we do. And people are going to say, and then you got to fight for it. And then you got to spend energy on it. And then people are like, well, that's hard. Well, it's hard to make a decision. That's why certain people get into position because they're willing to do it.
That's right. That's right. And I think another thing of human nature is that you get a lot more people that are vocal about not liking things than liking things, right? So often you hear all this perhaps negativity, but actually there's a lot of people that really like your work, but they don't say anything.
Yeah, see that's always hard. The cool thing about the net now, though, is what it used to be like we couldn't even, as artists, we couldn't even get anything out there. But now you put out there, it's like, hey, somebody in Portugal like this, somebody in Tel Aviv, or somebody in Brazil like this. Like now that we can put it out, you start to see, oh, I actually have an audience here. I could actually go here. I could go to Norway. These people like my stuff. But like in your hometown, everybody might hate it. And that's what you used to know is like, oh, everybody hates me here, so I can't do nothing. It's like, well, that's not the truth because you can actually go way beyond that now. And so, yeah, and even when you go on the net, you get all these haters who come in, they spend the energy to say they hate it. Okay, that's very productive. Like, what does that do? Like, doesn't mean anything. It's like if you come and tell me why you don't like it.
Yeah.
So they're going to take a grain of salt to anybody that says they hate it, but they can't tell you why.
Yeah.
Well, how productive is that? That doesn't really help you.
Yeah. There's a concept in Stoicism. I think it was Seneca that was talking about being like unoffendable, and I can't remember the exact analogy he used, but let's just for argument's sake say someone says you're ugly, right? And what he basically says is if someone says you're ugly and you know that you're not ugly, then why would you take offense, right? But he also says is if you are ugly and someone says you're ugly, they've only spoken the truth. So why would you take offense?
So you still don't get offense. So either way, you don't get offensive.
Like it might not have been kind for that person to bring it up, but you kind of think, well, yeah, I'm not the best looking dude, right? But it's one of those good things to. It's a good skill to have, and not to
kind of have that Teflon. Because a lot of people you think about artists, and people say, well, they're arrogant. Yeah, it does take some arrogance to go on stage and strut around because you have to believe that you
Yeah.
belong there.
Mm.
And a lot
Yeah.
of people is like, why is everybody not there? Because a lot of people won't get to the point where they believe they belong there.
That's right.
And
Yeah.
that goes into everything. It's people, oh, it's music. No, that applies to everything. If you don't believe you should be a manager, you'll never get to be a manager.
Mm.
You'll never get to be a director. You'll never be a CFO. You'll never be a CEO. Never be a senator or whatever. If you don't believe it, these people who do that believe they should have it. And then you look at them like, why are they like that? Well, to get there, you have to have a certain level of that. Or how could you do it?
Yeah, absolutely.
And then people are like, oh, they criticize the fact that the person has that. Well, like, maybe you should have some of that.
Yeah. Yeah. Exactly right.
And people have to give themselves permission. I think that's the biggest thing I found when I've talked to a lot of therapists is like, you have to give yourself permission, right, to start to, actually challenge. It's like you have the right to challenge things and actually do things. But some people have been taught since they're little that they didn't have the right. And then they have to fight that because it's like they got this glass ceiling that was like it's self-imposed.
Yeah.
And then you got to break through it because it's like until you believe it, you're never going to break through it.
Exactly right. Yeah. 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 I mean, carving out a new path kind of thing, it takes time. But I use the analogy of, imagine you're in a field, right? And there's already a well-trodden path that goes to the far left corner, but really you want to go to the far right corner, right? And that's full of long grass, right?
Yeah, to go, it's going to be work.
Yeah, and
it's unknown what's in there.
Yeah, if that's that would be the way most people will go because it's obvious, right? And it's automatic. But the moment you basically think, hold on, like that's the way I want to go, you know that it's going to be a while before that pathway becomes like clearer, right? But while that's happening, that other pathway is starting to overgrow and go back to wild grass again, right? But here's the thing: it doesn't matter how much work that takes. Just making that conscious decision of no, I want to go that way is really it really does like empower you, right? And
yeah, that's a total empowerment. That's how people get to be these people. Like, well, how could you be like that? Well, when you start to make those type of decisions, then you start to feel better. Because like
right.
because you talk to everybody I've talked to who's been like their own business, like to run their own business, they're a therapist or they're life coach. They made a decision where they weren't a life coach, right? And then suddenly something happened and they learned something and they want to teach. And they got to this moment where they actually went and did that path. That was not the normal path. And then they got on it and they said, oh, now I want to help other people. Or I want to show somebody. You think about a guy like Hendrix. It's like, why can't you use feedback?
Yeah.
Why, why can't you do something that the recording engineers say you shouldn't do that?
Yeah.
Maybe you should, right? And then the guitar became like a lead instrument, not a rhythm instrument, which opened it up to almost all the rock, heavy metal, all that stuff. Idea of being able to be a lead.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
It was totally created by him. It's like, certain musicians, they create this new path and then suddenly all these other people jump on it and they just like, oh, it's a whole new world because they were willing to try that new thing, opens up a totally different direction. And then you're like, wow, there's this whole new field that, now you can do that.
Yeah. And if you kind of think of your way of being as being a total of, say, hundreds and hundreds of smaller things, you can, it doesn't have to be such a big thing like that. So like for example, let's just take some random examples, right? Is you're going into a supermarket and someone doesn't hold the door open for you and it kind of slams in your face or whatever, right? That may really annoy you and you'll be thinking about it and what have you. That's one of those things where, again, your natural wiring as you know, something has triggered off to say that person was trying to hurt you, right? But when you can actually stop and say that person was just being careless, you know, she or he has probably got a million other things on his or her mind. I probably didn't even factor into their world, right?
You're not one of them.
Yeah, and similarly, like a car cuts across you, right, and you have to anchor on your brakes to stop him taking off the front of your car, and you know that if that had happened to me years ago, I would have been gesticulating out of the window and honking my horn, and it would have, yeah, and they're the kind that it's all of those things where if you whenever they happen, you know, like you walk into a meeting room and someone looks at you in a funny way, and again a part of your brain says, what have I done wrong, you know, when actually that person is actually thinking about, is my baby okay because she was vomiting in the morning, whatever those things are.
Yeah, the micro things, like micro.
Yeah, the more you can basically stop to think, hold on, that's probably not the case. They're you know, they're the, you know, if you think back to what I said about the going from the left corner to the right corner, you know, you've got all of these pathways that are making you do certain things a certain way.
Yeah.
And the moment you basically stop to think about things and then reassess your response, it actually doesn't take time that long before those going from, you know, point A to point C is actually becomes automatic, you know.
Yeah.
Lots of those things happen to me now, and I don't even.
Yeah,
just,
you could
they
have been
don't
on a
compute.
pathway. You go 0 to 100 in a heartbeat from a trigger, and now you can be like more thoughtful to say, hey, these people aren't really doing this to me. I have kind of like this baggage that's causing these triggers, and they're not even thinking about me. They're just kind of maybe
Mm,
not thoughtful, and so the
mm,
the little micro things they did don't escalate to major things.
that's
That
right.
doesn't escalate to the road rage. It doesn't escalate to the screaming at somebody or flipping somebody off or when people do these things. It's like, why is this person such on a hair trigger? Because it's like these things are building up, and they might not even realize all the stuff
Mm,
that built up to that
yeah.
moment that happened in
Mm,
that day. Right?
mm,
They got on the wrong side
exactly
of the
right.
bed. Wife said this. Kid said that. They got something in the mail. Then that
Mm,
one other thing hits them, and they're like, "Oh,
mm,
I'm up to 100. Like I'm ready to fight."
that's right. That's right. Yeah. But all of those things, you know, like, you know, you just said like the wife said this, right? You know, I remember years ago, you know, my wife might have said things in a certain way, and you know, next minute we're having a row, and when you get the chance to kind of reprocess things, you can kind of think, well, that's just her way of communicating. You know, I'm not saying it's wrong or right, but like
Yeah.
it's you know, it can, you know, it's just those hundreds of smaller things that build up to that bigger thing. Yeah.
Yeah, it's just how do you get better dynamics? And I think it's like once you start to realize that, you can get to be a better communicator. And a lot of people, they're running into roadblocks, right? And they're thinking, well, it's these other people are causing these roadblocks,
Mm,
right? And when they really go to look at it, it's like you're causing the roadblock, right?
mm,
Because a lot of people don't want to look at that because they're like, oh, these other people put the roadblock there and they keep on messing me up. It's like maybe you're messing yourself up.
yeah.
Like maybe you're not looking at the big holistic picture. Like you're thinking people are out doing these things to you, and it's like maybe you're not fully, in your environment actually
Mm,
assessing things in the right way. Like you got the bad information. You got a
mm,
bad operating system
yeah.
because you've got bad data. You got beliefs that aren't truths. you take actions on things that aren't true, thinking that they are true, making
Mm.
compounded decisions based on bad information.
Mm.
So
Exactly right.
it just cascades, and then and you know how things are in math. It's like things get exponential.
Yeah.
You can have exponential chemical reactions. It's like, ooh, it's like, oh, that's a binary thing. Like you put those two together, it's like boom.
Yeah.
The catalyst is like what's going on. Is like you got to start to look at things, and that means you have to be more mindful, right? You have to be more
Mm.
present,
Yeah.
not on
Yeah.
automatic, right?
Yeah. And challenging yourself, like I mean, it's sometimes it's not easy, but like sometimes I remember when I was on my journey, like sometimes I would be having some kind of reaction to something, and I would take some time out to think like what's behind this, right? And like what am I really thinking, and it's not always easy, right? But if you don't do anything at all, you're just going to be on that same mouse wheel, right?
Hmm.
But when you do take the time and you kind of think, okay, look, what made me react that way? Like you might write down, oh, it shows. Let's take the wife does something, right? It shows that she doesn't care about me. It shows it does she. But you write all these things down, and then you can go, then your job is to argue with those things.
Yeah, does that make sense?
Yeah, like what proof is there of that?
Yeah,
I have this. It's a bit of a. It might sound a bit strange at first, but I have this phrase that says, unless something. Imagine you've got two buckets, right? One is the true bucket, and one is the not true bucket, right? And this is the slightly weird thing, right? So the not true bucket does not mean that something could be true. It just means that it's not in that true bucket. It's not proven to be true, right?
hmm,
So if you take any piece of any belief and you like I had the belief because of my upbringing, I had the belief that my parents didn't love me, right?
hmm.
And I had to take that out of the true bucket and put it into the untrue bucket because I could find no proof of that, right?
It's just a
Now,
perception.
now, now it is actually possible that it's true, but until I know that it's true, it's in the not true bucket,
Hmm.
right? And just by doing that, you can get rid of a lot of baggage.
Yeah,
You can
yeah.
say
There's a lot
you
of
can say,
stuff that
oh,
was cascaded off of that. Yeah, I would
yeah,
think the exponential. What did it lead you to do? What actions did you do because of that? What
mm,
places did you go, or things that you did do or not do? There's all these like cascading events, and
yeah,
that's why I think it's real important to kind of do that kind of like people do this lesson learned.
mm,
Do a self-assessment. People
mm,
keep a diary, well, however you do it, but you start to like look at yourself, critical thinking.
mm,
They always talk about critical thinking, can you actually make a good assessment
yeah,
of the things you do? Your boss will say, well, prove to me why you should get a raise. Show me what you did.
mm,
That's valuable. That means why I should, give you
mm,
more money. Like, so
mm,
do you have to actually accurately state the things you did?
mm,
What did you not do? What could
mm,
you do better? They're going
mm,
to ask you, what were the 5 things that you did that you could have done better?
mm,
Like, where, where do you think you should be?
mm,
And a lot of people don't want to do that. It's
mm,
hard to do that self-assessment. Well, I'm exactly where I need to be. Really?
mm.
You know, most people are not exactly where they need to be even to the end. It's like they're still trying to get to where they need to be.
Yeah, exactly right.
So I think it's really awesome that you've come up with this app. So people go to www.everyyellow.com. They get access to this new um, app or process that you have for mental health?
Yeah. So, but basically, just to how it works is it uses a process called mental conditioning, and that's something that has actually that's happened to us over our lifetime. Every experience we've ever had has conditioned our brain in terms of that operating system. It's put down the data and the programming to be who you are, and we're basically flipping that to be on the positive side. So when you download the app, you answer some simple questions so that we understand like your strengths and weaknesses in your mindset, basically, and then we deliver to you an audio stream of personalized content overlaid on top of a backdrop of music and sound, and it's not another thing to do, right? It's you can do it while you're eating your breakfast or
That's cool.
driving to work.
Well, I think that's a really awesome tool to have, a different approach, and I love to hear about alternative approaches, because I'm kind of a creative person, so I think it's interesting when people use their talent to come up with new ideas. And this is an idea I haven't really heard about, and I think it's a cool approach for people who might be looking for something that they're like, oh, I don't like traditional processes. I want to try something different.
Yeah.
So this might give that person another way to do something like where they hadn't looked at that kind of approach. And so yeah, I think it's something people should check out. And I do thank you for being on the program today. We're kind of at the end of it for our hour, but it goes by quick, because it's just well, I like to have the free form because I like to get into it. And I think we got to a lot of the points, and probably not everything we need to get to, but I think people go to your website, www.everyyellow.com, and check out this app. And I think they'll be happy about what you can do for them. And I appreciate the time you spent with me today. The Family Electric Ghost program will be available everywhere in a couple hours. We'll give you a landing page for your audience to choose whatever podcast platform they want to. And thank you again for being on the show.
Yeah, thank you. It's been awesome.
Thank you. Have a good night or day. I always forget what time zone I'm in.
Yeah, it's 10 o'clock in the morning.
No, we're at like 6 o'clock dinner time, so you're gonna
so you're getting hungry.
I think I'm gonna make myself a steak or something.
Nice.
Have a good day.
Okay, Andrew, mate. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.